you, everyone. Yeah, I'm humbled by Terry's introduction. I joined this year in 2023, rejoined. I was doing my bachelor's degree in law in 2013, so I wouldn't call myself an authority at that stage. But Terry started us on a good note, because the individual you see there is none other than Albert Van Dicey, the man who has become most associated with the concept of the rule of law. He's a British intellectual, and which the Free Market Foundation really takes this concept of the rule of law very seriously with its rule of law project, which this past September we were in court as an amicus in a hate speech case, so a very active part of what we are and what we do. But I show you Dicey's face not to make a point about the rule of law per se, but instead to illustrate exactly what I do not mean when I say that things at the Free Market Foundation a few years ago were dicey. That is, I believe this is closer to the faces that some of you made, and certainly that some of us were making inside the Free Market Foundation during the course of, let's say, a little squabble. And that is the squabble that is the elephant in this beautiful room, and there's no point in avoiding it. It brought this organization really to the brink of collapse. And in a sense, I think we are here today to celebrate that collapse is not what in fact came to pass. So I am here to briefly talk about where we as the Free Market Foundation come from, both historically and intellectually. And in a moment, David will talk about where we're going. Now, the Free Market Foundation was founded in August of 1975. That's about 48 years ago. On the initiative of the Association of Chambers of Commerce of South Africa, or ASOCOM, of which Leon Lowe was the legal manager at the time. A steering committee comprising Leon as the chair, Ed Emery, Mike Lillard, Fred McCaskill, Andre Spies, and Mark Swanepoel was responsible for establishing what would ultimately become the Free Market Foundation. Lou Scher, the president of ASOCOM, briefly served as the FMF's first chairperson, very swiftly followed by Michael Conway O'Dowd, who I'm sure many of you would be familiar with, who served as chairman up until 2005, I believe, so many years. So in 1977, Lou Scher explained that the FMF was generally going to limit itself to the field of economics. But due to its dedication to freedom of enterprise, the fewer restrictions, economic restrictions that were on economic activity, the better. And he said, quote, that all races should be able to compete freely in all sectors, 1977. The FMF functioned informally for about a year since its founding, before it was registered in October of 1976. And finally held its inaugural Congress in 1977. Dirk Hertzog, chair of the Oude Meester Group and co-founder of Rembrandt, was the first chair of the FMF's executive committee, and he would later serve as the president of the FMF in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, and he also, during that time, served as the chair of the Afrikaanse Handelsinstituut. The FMF's founding was formally backed by ASOCOM, as one would expect, the South African Society of Marketers, the SA Federated Chamber of Industries, SACI, the National African Federation of Chambers of Commerce, or NAFCOC, and the Afrikaanse Handelsinstituut again. The first president of the FMF, Stefan de Toy-Viljoen, who was chairman of what later became Mercantile Bank later, and was also, quite ironically for what he said, he was at the time also the chairman of the Bantu Investment Corporation. He explained that people of all of South Africa's various races should acquire skin in the game of the free enterprise system, which South Africa claimed very vociferously it was subscribed to. And de Toy-Viljoen said that this must include the progressive removal of discriminatory laws and extending full home ownership to all South Africans. And the Free Market Foundation's Kaya Lam project very proudly today is giving effect to these words that were expressed several decades ago. Now, the fine gentleman there on the left, some of you may recognize, is none other than Friedrich August von Hayek, who was here in South Africa at an FMF function in 1978, and he today still remains one of our intellectual heroes. Milton Friedman kind of also made an appearance sometime later, and he's nice and everything, but that's the real deal. And no offense meant to Friedman, he's great. So in the 1980s, the Free Market Foundation held privatization out as a solution to South Africa's racial strife. Leon Lowe explained that the privatization of our state-owned entities and even functions of state would depoliticize economic sectors in which they operated. And here one thinks of the trains and the buses and so forth, which were simply forced to operate within the prevailing state ideology, as one might expect. So the Free Market Foundation played an important role also during the transition out of apartheid. Too, when alongside the Institute of Race Relations, who remains close friends to us today, opposed the inclusion of the laundry list of welfare entitlements that call themselves rights in our constitution today. And the FMF and the IRR understood back then what I think most or many South Africans are discovering as a reality today, which is that the state does not have unlimited resources to dish out, and that eventually rent-seeking will start to do significant harm to the economy, and we're living through this today. Nonetheless, even though we did end up with these entitlements in the Constitution, the FMF and others were successful in lobbying for a relatively strong guarantee of private property rights in the Constitution and for a so-called limitations clause that, at least in theory, sets a very high bar before government may simply limit our civil liberties. So the Free Market Foundation's post-apartheid journey has also been eventful. I don't want to downplay that, but it's been perhaps less exciting, and I think many of you will be more familiar with that history, so I will not dwell on that now. But I am not here only to talk about the history of the foundation per se. I am working on a longer form book that will be published on that topic in the hopefully not too distant future. Government is keeping me busy on other matters. But instead I want to spend some time now talking about where we come from in a heritage sense. What is our heritage? So in an editorial from 1976, the Free Market Foundation said of itself that, quote, "The Free Market Foundation is the only organization in the Republic with the singular goal of advancing capitalism." This word, capitalism, is maligned today, perhaps largely because it was popularized by the enemies of capitalism. It was popularized by people like Karl Marx and his successors. But we as free marketeers are not afraid of being labeled, and increasingly in South Africa, labels carry less and less meaning and have less and less effect, I would say. So we have made capitalism our own. So what does this word mean? So another individual who offends many people. The philosopher and novelist Ayn Rand wrote that, quote, "Capitalism is a social system based on the recognition of individual rights, including property rights, in which all property is privately owned." She clarified perhaps the most important characteristic of this social system of capitalism, and that is, she said, quote, "In a capitalist society, all human relationships are voluntary." The Free Market Foundation is an advocacy group that is unashamed in our liberalism, we are unashamed in our capitalism, and we are unashamed in our individualism. That alone might be contentious to most people, but another thing that we are unashamed of, which David will speak of in a moment, is our anti-statism. The niceties about the nature of government action in South Africa, we think, need to be properly relegated to the dustbin of history, and we fail to do that at our own peril. In a statist society, human relationships are certainly anything but voluntary. So we at the FMF stand on the shoulders of giants. People like Frederick Bastiat, Friedrich Hayek, Walter Williams. These are all people who have had and continue to have a significant influence on the effectiveness and the direction of the Free Market Foundation. But also there are people inside the organization. The contributions of Eustace Davey and Tembanola Chungu, of Jason Urbach, cannot be underemphasized. The likes of departed colleagues like Don Caldwell, like Michael O'Dowd, like Mark Swanepoel and Jan Lombard go unremembered as giants in the global cause for economic freedom. Gail Day, who is currently cycling around the world, is perhaps in the very recent history of the FMF, the one person who can be credited with keeping this organization alive. She had help, of course, from our dedicated team, many of whom are here today, and from people like former colleagues Chris Hatting, who was with the FMF up until recently, also weathering the storm that it had to go through. But without Gail, truly, the troubles of the last few years would have meant the end of the foundation. But we dare not, of course, forget Leon Lowe. I will first go through some of these pictures. For instance, there is Leon Lowe in 1986 at the Free Market Award bestowed on event bestowed on Ian Hetherington. The bottom there you see none other than the great Walter Williams, who tragically passed away, I believe, earlier this year. He is standing there with Simon Fisk, who received the Free Market Foundation's first Free Market Award. There is Themba Nolachungu, he's still one of our directors. The evil Chris Hani peering over his shoulder. And there sitting next to him is Baleka Mbete, and Leon is also in that picture. This was from the transition where the FMF exerted that important influence, classical liberal influence on the creation of our constitution, for what that's worth. Here we have Michael O'Dowd, who was a long-time chair, as I said, from the 1970s up until the 2000s. He passed away, I believe, also in 2005. And here we have Eustace Davies in this bottom right picture there on the left. He's still with us, still a director at the FMF. That's in 1983, where they were handing over the Free Market Award to Professor Geert de Wet. He's unfortunately the fellow with his back staying towards us. But I brought up Leon because it's worth saying that our parting of ways with Leon was extremely acrimonious, to say the very least. And there is no use in denying this. But the contribution that Leon made to the cause of free markets and civil liberty in this country through this organization are also completely undeniable, and we dare not deny them. And while our paths as the FMF and Leon may never cross again, we do wish him all the best with his new endeavors. And we do really hope that he can find peace in his heart with how things have turned out. And our eyes are truly, firmly on the future, and we are quite optimistic about that. And I will chat to you a bit later again, but for now, I thank you.